Saturday night here at Abhayagiri. Getting close to the summer solstice. I just, after our meditation, opened my eyes and it's still quite light outside. It seems like daytime. Lots happening out in the world. It's hard to kind of think of a reflection that doesn't include at least some acknowledgement of this past week, of events in the United States and actually spreading out to many other places. The different, I don't know how even to describe it, the tragedies that have been happening in the past bit of time, both the initiating activities, the violence, the hurting, the response to it that has been probably for the most part, peaceful, but some violence in response to the violence, which is the way violence happens often. And expressions of, extreme expressions of anger, resentment, difficulty, indignation. Not without a basis for it. Thankfully today, it seemed like, I just checked the news earlier today, and thankfully it seemed like it has settled to mostly peaceful demonstrations, expressions of concern, objection, expressing the not rightness of what's been happening, but with more of a peaceful quality, peaceful tone today. Just large numbers, thousands, hundreds of thousands, I think, across the country, gathering to just say, let's don't do this. So that's happening out in the world these days, just to know that, acknowledge that. During our Patimokkha recitation yesterday, Luang Por gave a reflection along the lines of not picking up and moving into, absorbing into those negative mind states that can come into our lives, into our hearts. To not pick them up in a way that leads to more negativity, to expression of akusala, unwholesome expressions of the heart, to use our wisdom and clarity to not jump on the bandwagon. Is a fairly low standard of behavior that we've seen in the past bit of time, all across the board, in many arenas. But we don't need to sink to that lowest common denominator, and that's what our task is: not to go there. Not to do it, not to buy into it. I have to sometimes take a very firm stance against moving into that kind of reactive state of mind that just wants to annihilate the unpleasant, annihilate the I guess unpleasant is almost an understatement considering what's been going on, but just no matter how horrific it may feel, not to meet it with that same kind of state of mind. Everyone knows that, at least in our tradition here, the Buddha teaching about hatred never ceasing through hatred, only through acceptance, mindfulness, clear comprehension, loving kindness. So just not to let ourselves sink to that lowest common denominator. We can always, it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to just relinquish our clarity and just move with that. Our training is to just resist that motion, resist that movement. I was reminded of a phrase that got picked up and has been repeated a lot. Was about 4 years ago. That Michelle Obama made in response to just some negative things that were going on, campaigning, all that kind of stuff, all the things that happen in politics. More pronounced these days, it seems like. And her comment, which got repeated often, many times, over and over again, when they go low, we go high. So just to recognize that we don't need to respond. And she got some flack for that, even from members of her own party who are saying, no, we've got to respond to this. We can't let people get away with it. We have to, beat them at their own game. And she was steadfast, firm over the years in recounting that. She said, no, it just doesn't work. It won't ever work. Maybe some short-term gratification, but in the long run, it's not the answer. I've always appreciated that. When they go low, we go high. We just don't buy into it. Just don't jump on that bandwagon. So we have to develop some tools. We have to figure out how to do that. When I was, before I discovered Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings, I often would ponder to myself, both in good times, but more often in bad times, mental states, feeling pain of some sort in the internal regions, mental pain. I would often pose that question. I was like, oh, what is this all about? What is essentially, what is the meaning of life? And it was after, many years of kind of having that question in the back of my mind, rolling around all the time, reflecting on it, and never finding really suitable answer, going through different forms of religion, spirituality, running a whole gamut of how those are expressed in the world, and never coming up with anything particularly satisfying until coming across the Buddha's teachings. And ironically realizing that, well, there really isn't any meaning of life. And understanding more fully along the way what the Buddha was pointing to, that, oh, that's a relief. I don't have to find that. There is really, no overall purpose that's particularly a purpose that's defined by a supreme creator or a supreme force or even a collective consciousness. That's not what the teachings are all about. I was listening to a talk the other night, recorded talk of Ajahn Jayasara, when he was mentioning that as well, that people often have that question, what is the meaning of life? And he said that actually it's better to phrase the question differently. And rather than what is the meaning of life, we should ask ourselves, what can I do to give meaning to life? And that points to a whole different state of mind, a whole different way we can orient ourselves. What can I do to give meaning to life? And there's all sorts of things that we can do that creates a quality of our being, quality of our minds, that makes it a much more beautiful place to dwell, makes our interior experience more easeful, more skillful, more helpful, that we can develop, and to bring that also to those around us in a way of giving meaning towards bringing a sense of peace and caring and kindness and service and inward stability. So beginning with how to construct that keeps coming back to this development of metta bhavana, the Brahma-viharas in general, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity as well, of course. This is where we can give meaning to our lives, to those around us. And oftentimes metta bhavana, metta practice, all the Brahma-viharas are seen as constructing mind states as antidotes to the negative ones. So, constructing a state of metta, a mind state of loving kindness, loving friendliness, as a way of responding to or meeting the anger, the aversion, the irritation aspects of our experience, and as a way of neutralizing them. And sometimes we even hear, it's like a way of eventually eliminating them from our experience, preventing our having to experience them. But that sets a pretty tall, pretty high standard, and I actually think that kind of attitude of the Brahma-viharas as antidotes to these states of mind, more of thinking of it as developing a container to hold these experiences, creating a very large space in our hearts, our minds, where the forces of negativity, the perceptions and feelings that come through our hearts and minds when the world around us conspires to push these things into our face. When those enter into our experience, these Brahma-viharas, metta, is this container where it's okay that these things happen. We're not looking to annihilate all of these experiences. That's just another form of resistance. But we're looking to acknowledge their presence in our lives. It's hard not to be impacted and to feel a wave or a rush, a feeling and memory when something extremely powerfully negative, unpleasant, even we might want to say, not right in its own way. Not right meaning harmful. But to acknowledge that, as much as we resist and think it's unfair, unjust, and shouldn't be, here it is. So metta isn't this big defensive shield that we put up to act as a deflector to these experiences, but rather as that vast state of openness to the experience, not a buying into it or a justification of it, but an acknowledgement of it, of its power, of its presence, of the effect that it has. And that sense of vast broadness, large vessel, allows us to experience an impact, but not get lost into reactivity that is just going to perpetuate the whole state of mind, the whole negative experience by adding fuel to the fire. It allows us to step back and not fuel the fire, but not to deny it. So we have this openness, this caring, this state of mind that allows the world to unfold according to its causes and conditions without buying into it. And it's a very beautiful state of mind when there isn't something rushing through it that is challenging it. The openness, the state of mind of the Brahma-viharas is, particularly with Metta, it's described that full development. It's absorption into the beautiful. It's like this beatific experience, not in a sensory way in terms of the five physical senses, but in a very broad, beautiful mental experience that pretty much allows space for just about anything, even that which rushes at us full force. Kind of like maybe on a warm summer night, standing on this image came up, standing on a little rural train platform and looking at the stars, experiencing some spaciousness and peace, and then from the distance, the express train is coming down the tracks, and as it is passing by, not stopping for this train station, it just barrels through, and you feel the impact of the wind, the force between yourself and the train passing by. You step back, give a little distance, but you don't try and grab hold of the rail next to the door to jump on the train. You just let it pass, and then soon it's gone past, and it's fading into the distance. And sooner or later, it's disappeared. It's gone, and you're back to that quiet, peaceful, warm summer sky. kind of how I envision the experience of that vastness of Metta, Brahma-viharas, when a unwanted stimulation comes through. It's just, it has an impact, you feel it. You don't jump on, and it keeps going till it's gone. So that's what we're looking as a way of maybe reconstructing our minds in a way. There's reconstructive surgery. You take something that's been damaged or it's not good, not useful, figure out a way to mold it into something that is going to be a skillful platform for us to stand on. And then when the people come that want to challenge that or create trouble or give us a run for our money in terms of staying solid, upsetting things happen, violence happens, chaos, the world, all of these things that have been happening since beginningless time and will keep happening in samsara, various ways. We have a way to be with that, to handle that, to acknowledge it, and possibly at some point in the future respond skillfully, peacefully. But we don't let it rob us of our peace of mind. It's I just love the phrase that Ajahn Sucitto, I heard him say in a talk, of when these people come, these challenges come, these events happen, it's like, whatever you do, don't let them hijack your metta. Don't let anyone take that away. So, with lots of wise attention and skill, we can really develop those vast states of mind that can hold just about everything. And respond, and then use that as our base for responding in a skillful way, the way that will make a difference without creating more of a problem. And as we do that too, we start to develop a state of mind that is more reflective and quieter, and not consumed with all of the objects that come through, for better or for worse. And then we have the opportunity to actually start seeing the world around us with more clarity and with more wisdom. It's not just a matter of creating a vast, beautiful space that we can stay focused on, but to start to develop a clear seeing as well. We can use that space not only as a divine abiding, as they're called, or a sublime abiding as well, which it is, and it's certainly great to spend lots of time there, but to also use it for the development of clarity, of discernment. This is the space in which that can start to arise with the proper focus, with the proper attention. Because it's like, just thinking about the train thing again. It's like we don't try and grab onto that express train, but eventually, we'll get on a train, and the local kind of slowly plug along to the next station, next station, next station, riding the train, and then kind of drifting a little bit maybe, spacing out on the ride, and then get off at another platform somewhere down the line, and we still have that question of, how did I get here? Because we're still traveling in the realm of the conditioned. Maybe a bit more peacefully, hopefully, a lot more peacefully. But we're still hitching on the ride. And as pleasant or as good as it might be, we soon realize, if we look clearly, that it all changes, that it's never permanent. We can't stay on that slow train forever. At some point we have to get off and wonder what it is all about. How did we get here again? Is there any end to this? So we develop that reflection on anicca, change, in relation to everything, in relation to all experience. Coarse, subtle, whatever the experience is, it's always changing. And as we see that more and more clearly, we develop this jnana-dasana, the knowledge and vision of the way things really are. That there's nothing that we can take a permanent refuge in the realm of this conditioned experience, the world. See the inherent unsatisfactoriness and the relative uncontrollability of it. All these things arising, passing away, without any consistency and without any solidity, without any overarching control. Everything based on causes and conditions. And how this can't ever be perpetually satisfying in any way. So, with that kind of clarity of mind and reflection, observation, clarity of knowledge and vision, we just see that, as the Buddha talks about in one of his famous teachings, all that arises is just dukkha arising, all that ceases is just dukkha ceasing. So as that clarity of understanding becomes more and more deep, we see it more and more in our experience, we see it in every passing moment, arising and ceasing in every moment. There comes this sense of such an extreme clarity that we just don't get on the train anymore. No matter how pleasant it might be, no matter how unpleasant it might be, we aren't enchanted by the appearance. We see it so clearly that we lose that sense of being lost, of ignorance. And we become disenchanted. We're just not fooled by it. And as the teachings express, when there is that disenchantment, when there is that clear knowing, and the clear knowledge of the arising and ceasing of dukkha, that's the this dispassion occurs, that we don't grab onto, we don't cling to, we don't hold to all of these things that we've used to prop up a sense of becoming, a sense of ourselves. And we might then have this experience of the ceasing, the fading of ignorance, the cessation of avijja. And when that happens, the momentum of the mind, the formations, sankhara, that movement, sankhara being just that continuous movement, expression outwards in whatever form of action or speech or mental activity. With that lack of ignorance, a cessation of ignorance, seeing things truly as they are, the impulse to move out, to get away from, to be absorbed in the world, that ceases as well. Sankharas just settle down and stop, and then they don't arise with this clear knowing, peaceful, still, not buying into things, not moving. And as that stops, whether it's temporary or in the end, the completion of the work, the movement based on greed, hatred, and delusion, those things aren't there anymore to cause the mind to move into unskillfulness, into suffering. And consciousness just doesn't land anywhere, doesn't move anywhere. It, with that cessation of volitional movement, cessation of sankhara, the consciousness ceases to land on sights, sounds, tastes, odors, sensations, bodily sensations, and the mind itself. That vijnana, consciousness, divided knowing, divided into the six sense bases, that it becomes a form of awareness that doesn't land. It's like in the simile the Buddha talks about, if the light from the eastern, the sun in the eastern sky comes in through a window on the eastern wall of a room, and then hits the western wall, or the question is when the light comes in through the eastern wall, or through the eastern window, where does it hit? And the bhikkhus answer, well, it hits the western wall. Buddha says, well, if that wall isn't there, where does it hit? It hits the ground. Well, if that ground isn't there, the ground is gone. Where does it hit? The light hits the water underneath. If that water's gone, where does it hit? And the answer, well, it just doesn't hit anywhere. It doesn't land. That could be a simile for consciousness that doesn't land on any of the six sense bases. It doesn't land, it doesn't grow, it doesn't proliferate, it doesn't enter into the realm of becoming. And with that is the cessation of becoming, of birth, of suffering, the cessation, the non-arising of suffering. All from this clear seeing that's possible through the clarity of mind. So in the meantime, though, the task is to develop a place in our hearts and a place in our lives, and starting in the physical world around us, a place where this can happen, where we can settle into this and not buy into all of these things that are happening in the world. I mean, to know them, not to deny them, to experience them, to know them fully, but not to buy into them. And we have to have all the props to develop the spaciousness of mind, the container of loving kindness, and I can't think that there's any better place to do that than here in a monastery, or people who are at home listening to this, in the peace of your own homes, your places where you can be quiet and reflect and consider all of this, but to just not let the mind go into these states that aren't going to lead to anywhere other than entanglement and more upset. Sometimes people say, well, it's like ignoring things and living in our own bubble, but I think this is the bubble that I want to live in, surrounded by people who are really striving to see the truth and to see a peaceful way of being in the world, inside themselves and outside themselves. This is where it's at. I don't think it's a denial of the outside world. It's not a distancing from ourselves, removing ourselves from experience, but it's nourishing and protecting goodness in a way that hopefully will be contagious at some point. That's the kind of virus that we want to perpetuate, virus of spacious kindness. And then to let it serve as a platform for true understanding. So, this is an occasion that I will say is, at least for a while, my last last talk for a bit of time anyway. Be heading up to the Pacific Hermitage day after tomorrow. Spend the Vasa there with Ajahn Sudanto, taking Tan Rakito along. We'll be there for around 4 months or so. Not quite sure when we'll be coming back. Sometime in October maybe. And just also the kind of a stepping down from the role of cohabiting with Ajahn Yaniko, and wishing him peace and well-being, and encouraging the community to be nice to him. And we'll see how the summer unfolds, and all going well enough. Maybe reconvene here in a few months. Okay, I'll leave it for reflection this evening.